Right, we're into our presidential address. David Stevens, senior scientist with AgResearch, animal scientist extraordinaire, and we've been very interested to see what you have, David. Mr. President.
Thanks very much, Graham. It's been an awesome conference, that's for sure. And the recurring theme that has come through, and I don't know, somebody suggested that we orchestrated it, and it plays right into where I want to be with my talk, and that's been systems, and the place of understanding how the system works, how things go into the system, that makes a change. Now, farm systems research has a long history of success in New Zealand, and we saw a little bit of that at Hurstall's and out of Albans the other day, in terms of people taking on new technologies based on the science that they've seen and putting it into action. However, as the world and the technologies change even more rapidly around us, is it time to move away from what has been in the past a very pragmatic and problem-solving approach to our systems work, to work towards a broader understanding of how systems themselves actually work? Now, Professor Sean Hendy, and you may or may not know the name, defined the need for new thinking quite clearly at the launch of the recently formed Te Punaha Matatani, the Centre of Research Excellence for Complex Systems and Networks. Now, he said, by understanding the networks that underlie complex systems, and we heard the phrase complex adaptive systems brought up yesterday, we will get new insights into how to influence them and how to develop better strategies for managing them. And that has been a real theme that's come through over the last 3 days. The power of systems research provides the opportunities for New Zealand to define its own path and make its own decisions. And these opportunities come through understanding how the systems actually respond or how they can be reconfigured. And you saw John yesterday put up some stuff about the AgInform model, about how we're looking at trying to reconfigure systems to capture benefits that meet our needs. So the key to understanding systems research itself is to understand the holistic nature of the approach. Now, that's quite different from the traditional approach, which is reductionist. So in a reductionist approach, we break the system down into its constituent parts and we examine those. And usually what we try to do is isolate them as much as possible to get a pure effect. And you saw again last night the celebration of somebody who has done that so successfully, Derek Moot, in terms of creating first principles. Systems research is how to put those first principles back together and make something more than what you can see. It's about synthesis rather than reductionism. So what I want to do is use an analogy that we all know, and that's the bicycle. So, who in the audience owns a bicycle? Hands up, please. Okay, that's quite good. Who's ridden a bicycle? Yeah, that's good. I would suggest probably close to 9/10 of the world's population has ridden a bicycle at some time in their history. So what type of bicycle do you ride? Is yours an Old Faithful that takes you to work? Or is it a state-of-the-art mountain bike? Okay, who's got Old Faithfuls? Who's got a state-of-the-art mountain bike? Okay. Are they the same thing? They are still bicycles. So, depends on your necessity, your needs as to what bicycle you might own. So if you disassembled a bicycle and had a look at its component parts, that's a traditional reductionist approach. So you would have a handful of gears, you'd have a frame, you'd have a chain, you might have one or two other things, some levers, some wheels, a set of brakes. Now if you looked at those components, they could be all sorts of things. They could be high-tech, low-tech, they could be made of steel, they could be made of carbon fibre, but they all, when you put them back together, make up a bicycle. Now, when you assemble a bicycle, you do something that none of those component parts could do. You create a mode of transport, or something else in fact. We'll work through that in a minute. But the outcome cannot be predicted from looking at those pile of parts on the floor. So examining the component parts in isolation does not give you a bicycle. So actually, when you put them back together, its function is still not complete. You actually need a rider to complete that system. Because the bicycle goes nowhere and does not function as a mode of transport unless somebody gets on it and makes it work. So then all of a sudden you've got a system in operation. Now that system has a boundary around the outside of it, and that's the boundary around the bicycle and the rider. And that system sits inside other systems. So the road network, the track, and so it exhibits what we call nesting. It sits inside other systems. The system interacts with those surroundings. So that's the friction of the road, the drag of the wind, and the motorists around it, for example. So it interprets its environment and it learns from feedback. It learns that you do have to dodge the motorist. You do have to brake when you go downhill. We learned that one quite early on in our life, didn't we? At least I did. The system evolves itself as well. So we used to have penny farthings, and they were replaced with chain-driven bicycles. They went on from the 10 speed through to the 18 speed, and guess what? The mountain bike actually is a subspecies in all of that. So the need of the system is actually defined defines the application of those components. So if I was riding to work, I would choose quite a different option, potentially, than careening downhill at some sort of man-rated knots. So it depends on the need as to how you put those components together. But underneath all of that, you have that underlying set of needs, you have the underlying set of components, and you have the underlying set of first principles of how to ride that bicycle. Right. And so we can work with those first principles, and then we can actually start to look at the evolution of bicycle development, so to speak. But what does happen, we note, is that the outcomes are quite diverse. So, and it's the same in farming. You take the same set of land that we saw at Nicky and Jonty's yesterday, and then you've got Herstal's, and the development of the system that came out of those base resources, and mostly the same principles. We graze grass, we grow grass, we put fertiliser on, and the systems that come out are quite different. Now, if we were going down the track of researching that, we might research a single bicycle rider combination. So if I were to examine myself, for example, we would find that actually there are different purposes, different needs, and different investments over time. So when I was young, I bought the most expensive bicycle that I could find. It was fast, it was light, and I used it to go to university. I used it for exercise. I used it to pursue the love of my life. Those sort of things, they were very important to me. The needs were really high. If I have a look in the shed now, my bicycle was bought on Trade Me for $20. And it is heavy and it is slow. And it usually has flat tyres. Now my son's bicycle, this is a different case study. Now his bicycles have become more and more expensive. He has invested in technology quite heavily. His latest purchase at a retail value was about $8,000 worth. Slightly more than his car. What happens there is the need for speed and hearing off downhill actually outgrew his skills, and so he replaced skill with technology. So full-face helmets and body armour, titanium frames and disc brakes and things like that. Not quite the same case study that I presented. But you can see how things emerge from all of that. You can see that these systems, although they have the same components, become something quite different. The role of systems science and all of that is to understand the drivers of that system. And they occur both inside the system, where a lot of our research has been. We understand the biophysical interactions and all that sort of stuff. That's where our systems science has been a lot in the past. But also we need to look outside the system, to the environment and what the pressures are from the outside, making those changes. So the system research does not prescribe best. This is not about saying that's the best thing to do. This is saying here are your options and here is where the likely outcomes are. This does not have any values associated with it. So understanding how we can direct those attendant systems properties to make something different and something new is something we should aspire to. So, how am I doing for time? It's awesome. If we look at something quite different now, systems research, and this is where some of Sean Hendy's work comes from, and the Otago University are working in this space as well. And you're thinking to yourself, Otago University, this is about methodologies and how it's about metabolism. So an example comes from computational chemistry. And this approach has actually developed out of quantum mechanics. And it's not complex adaptive systems, but it's complex physical systems, but they are very closely aligned. And it's actually supported by the power of supercomputers. Without supercomputers, we would not do this research. It uses theoretical knowledge based on the behaviour of electrons to understand how atoms and molecules interact. And I was told I have to get the terminology about atoms and molecules right, because they're different, really. The equations that are involved are solved using approximations due to some of the aspects of if you've ever looked at the current theories on electron behaviour, it's what we call infinitely complex. And what we do is we use a metabolic approach, building up from the bottom, with supercomputers' help. And what we get from that are new insights into, for example, things like the use of catalysts in the Haber-Bosch process. Now, the Haber-Bosch process takes hydrogen and nitrogen and fuses it together to create ammonia. And ammonia then creates fertiliser. And it is probably the greatest reaction or chemical reaction of the 20th century. Without it, we would not support the population that we have now. So there we see us talking about the bicycle, we've talked about the farm, and we've talked about atoms. They are all systems research, all across the scale. And the thing in that process is the methodologies are quite similar. We use modelling, we use first principles that we know, and we spend a lot of time gathering first principles in the farming system. And then once we have the outcomes from those models, we use techniques such as Bayesian network analysis and Monte Carlo simulation to look at variation and error terms. And so actually, all of these options are all linked together. They're all common. So how do we reconcile research into nanoparticle behaviour with farming systems research? Well, one example actually comes from just looking at how things react in the system. Things like surface mapping of hydrogen atom energies can also be looked into farming communities. using the techniques, and obviously there's hydrogen atoms in the farming community as well, but they're not reacting quite the same way. One example that we do have is the Rural Futures Multi-Agent Simulation Project. Now, some of you in the audience will know that project, but what it did was it actually modelled the rise of the dairy industry in Southland. And so rather than looking at how atoms react, it looked at how things like profitability, farm practice, social influence, financial liability, and land use capability all went together and all contributed to decision making. Now, the value of that work was not around the calibration of the model. The value of that work was in putting the model together in a way that could actually predict change in our communities. And it's a watershed piece of research to show us how we might imagine new futures. What it does is it gives us the opportunity and it gives us the tools to examine what will happen in the future. It gives us the opportunity to examine what happens when the relative profitability of enterprises change. It gives us the opportunity to look at what happens when government changes policy. It gives us the opportunity, for example, to examine what happens when tourism increases in your region. How are you going to respond to that? So, this is my plea to you, do we continue just to use that pragmatic approach to solve problems, just sort of one problem at a time, fitting some sort of new technology into an old system? Or do we change focus and do we take the lesson from the bicycle? The techniques that we can use in system science span the breadth and depth of the systems that we use, from the hydrogen atom through to the whole farm system and beyond into our rural communities. An holistic approach to determine those underlying first principles of farming systems and their interaction with other systems will provide those new insights that we need. Then research programs will have new understanding of the real powers of transformational change. And that's what Richard Green was talking about yesterday. Hopefully then we will be better placed to take control of our future, exactly as envisaged by Sean Hendy at the inauguration of the meeting place of many faces. That's the translation of the Maori. My proposition is not to throw out what we know now, but to add to it with a whole deeper level of understanding. Thank you.